Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to a Mystery Stamping Stamp Club event. My name is Lori Meyer and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. We are recording this meeting because there are some of our club members who are not able to join us tonight and wanted to make sure that they were able to see the project. But before I turn this over to the camera, I want to make sure that I give credit to a couple of other demonstrators. One is Sharon Armstrong. I'm sure many of you know her name. She is very well known in the stamping community, a very successful demonstrator. She pioneered, I believe, the mystery stamping, and I am using somewhat of the format that she uses. So Sharon, if you happen to watch this, I just want to say thank you. And the other person that I need to thank is the lady who actually came up with this design. And I will give her credit in just a couple minutes when we get into it. So I wanted to just mention those two ladies before I get started, and I'll mention the other person in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to turn my camera over to an overview, and I hope everybody can see that. And we do have some folks who are on the meeting. We may have some questions that will pop up as we go through. So please, anybody, if you have any questions, just jump in and ask. But welcome to Mystery Stamping. This little guy makes me smile. I just like him a lot. And what I'm going to do, which is very, very similar to what Sharon does, I'm just bringing this over here, sorry, is I am going to be going through and giving clues as far as what you need, and then you are going to be making your card. If you have questions along the way, I will answer them, but the hope is that the clues are good enough for you to do what you need to do. All right, this was already sent out in an email to our stamp club, and I am going to show you what I have done for the card that you will see at the end. So I cut a piece of cardstock and I used Calypso Coral. This is measuring 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. This is the size of a standard A2 card, but it's only one layer. Okay. Then for the DSP, I cut a piece that is 5 3/8 by 12. This is the piece that I'm using. It's from the Just Peachy Designer Series paper, and it is absolutely stunning. So that is my second piece. Then I've got a piece of cardstock that I cut, and this is going to be for the inside sentiment. It is 3 inches wide, 4 3/8 inches long. The DSP, if you want, is just another piece, 2 1/2 by 3 3/4. And then I do have some scrap that I'm going to use for my sentiment that will go on the front. And I've got some fun embellishments, some ribbons, some twine, and some other things that I'm going to use for my embellishments. I'm going to use Tombow, and on a couple samples, I also used some dimensionals, and I do need a bone folder and a scoring board. So these are the piece parts. So that's clue number 1. And before I go any further, the other demonstrator that I want to give credit to is Tammy Beard. She is the lady whose design I found on Pinterest, and it definitely inspired the card that we are going to be doing tonight. So Tammy, thank you for that. Okay, here's where we start the work. Clue number 2. What you are going to do is you're going to lay your DSP down so that the piece is in a landscape view. Make sure that the pattern that you want to be the main pattern showing on that Designer Series paper is facing you. So it's up and it's facing you. Then you're going to make 3 score lines. I'm going to leave this up, this whole page up. And you're going to let me know when you're done with this, but you're going to score at 1 inch. So you're going to score it at 1 inch, at 4 inches, and at 8 inches. And then we're going to do some folds. We're going to fold toward and away and all of that. So the first thing we're all going to do is work on our designer series paper. And I'm going to do this with you. I am not going to show you what I am doing. You just have to trust me that I am doing this in the background. And the intention of me doing this is if there are any questions along the way that I can answer as we are working together. So you may be hearing me. I am doing my 3 score lines. So I just scored my paper at 1 inch, 4 inches, and 8 inches. And again, I have it so the pattern that I want to be seen is showing toward me. And I'm going to kind of look on my computer. And when you guys are at the point that you got the scores done, if you can just give a little thumbs up and I can just see that everybody's kind of good. Okay. All right. So everybody looks like they've done the scoring. So let's talk about how these score lines are going to be folded. So if you go to the left side of your paper and you go to the 1 inch, you're going to fold that toward you. And I'm going to cheat. I'm going to show you what that means. And this is the only one that I'm going to show you. So I'm folding that toward me. I'm folding that 1 inch toward me. So that's what I mean by toward. And you're going to give that a really nice burnish. The next fold at that 4 inch score line, you're going to fold it away from you. So the opposite direction, and give that a nice burnish as well. And again, I'm doing this in the background so that we can all be at the same point. And then for the 8 inch score line, you're going to fold that toward you. So the first is toward you. The second is away from you. The third is toward you. And just make sure you give each one of those score lines just a nice little burnish. You do want this to lay flat when it is part of your card. So you want it to be nice and flat at this point. All right, I'm again going to look at everyone that I can see on my computer. And if you're done completely with what is on this page, if you can just do a quick thumbs up. All right, okay. So we are now going to move to the next step. And that next step is we are going to attach the designer series paper that we just folded and scored to the card base. I really would like you to read all the way through this, and I'll read it with you because this is important. And you really need to kind of think about how it's going to sit on the card base. And remember, your card base is a single layer of cardstock, 4 1/4, 5 1/2. So the finished card, the designer series paper that you just folded is going to pull toward you with the 1 inch fold on the left. That means, obviously, that that DSP needs to be adhered to the card base. The part that is going to be adhered to the base is between the 8 inch score line and the end of the card. So if you go back and you kind of pull your designer series paper out, you're unwinding the accordion, look between the area between that where you scored at 8 inches and where the card ends. And the back of that is what you want to adhere to the card stock. And you want to adhere your designer series paper so the bottom right-hand corner and the designer series paper line up where my fingers are. So you want to have that designer series paper butt up against the right side and the bottom of your cardstock. And if you do it the way the directions hopefully make sense.
So Lori,
Yep, go right ahead.
your DSP, there's not a frame or anything. It's just totally flush with the back in that corner, that bottom right corner.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And what you will notice is the DSP and the card base are not the same width or height. So you're going to have a little border at the top and a little border on one side of your card that will show your card base color.
You know, we don't like that, Lori. We like it centered so there's a frame all around it.
I
know.
It goes against every grain of our being.
I know, but there's actually a reason for this, and it's really clever. And I hear you, and I agree with you. But I think when you see it, or as you're doing this and you see where we're going, you're going, I hope that you really like this. And I think Tammy came up with a really cool idea. And it's just a little different. So I'm doing it along with you. Just getting my piece lined up. And in a second, I'm going to check and see how we're all doing. And again, if you, when I check in just a second, if you can give me a thumbs up. I'm not absolutely there yet. I'm arguing with my Tombow. I am winning, so that's a good thing. And when we get done with this, you're going to see that this is it's a very quick card to make, and also one that you can, you know, just like many cards, you can make for any occasion that you want to. Okay, so I am now looking at the screen, and if folks who are through this clue, you can just give me a thumbs up. And if there's anyone who needs a couple minutes, and I'm just waiting on one person, I think. Is everybody's good? Okay, all right. So essentially, obviously, what we've done so far is we've put our DSP in the format we need. We've attached that to the card. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get into some stamping, and we're going to complete the sentiment that goes on the inside of the card. So choose your stamps and your ink colors. And you may want to, and I'm sure you already have, think about the colors that are in the designer series paper, the sentiments that you want to use, and you are going to stamp whatever you would like on the piece of cardstock that we had on that first clue. This is the piece that measures 3 by 4 3/8. Orient it in a portrait view. So when the card is going to be in this view, and go ahead and stamp whatever you would like on that. And when you're done, you are going to adhere this piece to, this is where I want to make sure that this clue makes sense. You're going to adhere that to the inside of the card. So in other words, if you think about the piece that you have, the designer series paper that you have attached to the card base, that designer series paper now opens up like a card. There is a card that is completely designer series paper. It measures hold on. 5 3/8 by 4. So it's a card within a card. And when you're done with your sentiment, you want to adhere that to what looks like a card that's been created by your designer series paper. Does that make any sense to anybody?
No.
All right, I'm gonna show you something really quick. So here's what I've done so far. This is how the designer series paper, I'm not showing you all of it, but this is where I adhered it to that piece of cardstock.
Yes.
If I were to fold this down, you would see on the other side, there's a little bit of the Calypso coral showing on the left.
Mhm.
This is where you're going to put that sentiment. So this is now a card within a card. So you're going to put that sentiment on the back right in here.
Gotcha.
Okay. That was the hardest thing for me to figure out how to try to explain, and I obviously did a really bad job. And the card that Tammy Beard did was really cute, and she used a lot of the items that are in the You're a Peach suite. And some really pretty oranges and greens and blues. And what caught my eye is when she stamped the sentiment, she used two colors. She used two parts of the sentiment that are in the stamp set. In this stamp set, Sweet as a Peach. And she actually used a couple of different colors to bring out the sentiment. So it was really kind of cool. So I definitely used her idea on that. And, you know, obviously there are going to be a ton of ideas that you're going to have with this, combining the designs of the designer series paper and the sentiments that you have on your stamps for all sorts of different occasions and different people. And I really hope that you like this when we're done with that. And you will see, I've ended up making 4 different examples that I'll show you. And all of them have the Sweet as a Peach stamps included. And then also the designer series paper, like I mentioned, that I used for each one is the really pretty You're a Peach designer series paper. There's some gorgeous patterns and gorgeous colors in here. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And you can get 2 cards out of 1 piece of DSP with this particular design. All right, I'm going to peek at my screen and just see how folks are doing. If you are done, just stick up your thumb. All right, we got a couple of people who are still working, which is completely fine. And the next thing we're going to do, just so you know, is we're going to work on the front of the card. So one of the things, if you haven't done this, is you may want to think about the sentiments and the ink that you'll use on the front, and also whether you're going to die cut or punch or cut or whatever it is that you would like to do. So let me just check in and see if everybody, and I'm sorry to ask again, but if you already did the thumbs up, if you can do it one more time, I would appreciate it. All right, we're all good. Okay, so we're going to move to the next clue. And this is the one where we're going to do the front. So when I say front, and again, you'll remember that I said when this card is done, the designer series paper pulls forward. So the front of the card is really that 1-inch fold. That's what you're going to be attaching. You're going to use to attach your sentiment, any kinds of embellishments maybe, but especially the sentiment. So figure out what stamp settings you want. Go ahead and stamp them on whatever kind of paper you're going to use. I used just some white cardstock. I matched the color that I used for the inside sentiment. You definitely don't need to do that. And go ahead and stamp whatever it is that you want. Die cut it, punch it, whatever makes you happy. And as you're doing that, and as you're thinking about what you might want to use, just remember that you're going to be putting it onto that 1-inch fold on that designer series paper. And if you don't pay attention to anything else except this one clue or one piece on this page, this is super important. Make sure that when you add your sentiment, or if you want to stick some ribbon under it, or whatever you want to do, that you're only putting the adhesive on that 1-inch fold, because you want it to move. And if you put it so that the adhesive goes beyond that 1-inch fold, you may get glue where you don't want it to go. So make sure when you're putting things down, you're just putting it on that 1-inch fold. And in just a minute, I'm going to show you an example of what I've done, because it's this place right here is going to be more adding some bling and doing some other things that you may want to do. Okay. Does anybody have a question? Is anybody completely confused?
Do we put it in the center of the 1-inch fold or wherever you want?
Wherever you want.
Okay.
Wherever you would like. If you cut out a piece of designer series paper as an additional, this was the optional piece, you have options of where you may want to put that piece. I'm going to bring in what I showed you before. So just imagine this now has a sentiment that is adhered to the back on this side. You could put that optional piece of designer series paper over here if you want. There may be another spot that would make you more happy. And you don't have to use that second piece of designer series paper. That is completely up to you. And we'll also talk about some other options that you may want to do rather than put a second piece in there. Okay. So that is the final clue.
Uh-oh.
So there were not many. And I'm going to put this little dude back on the top. And I'm going to show you the first card that I made using this technique. And then we can talk about some options, and we'll share the cards that you have made as well. So this is the card that I first made with this technique. And like I've already told you, I use the everything from the Euro Peach, and see how this folds up toward you, and then you have your inside. So you pull it up and you have your inside card. The reason that this is flush with the right side and the bottom is you can stand it up. When you pull it out, you can stand it up and it's going to stand flat. If we had put it in the middle, which I know we all would really like to do because we tend to like to do that, it would not have stood up. And it also, in my opinion, you know, it gives a nice little frame on the left side and up at the top. I tried to match colors, as you can see, with the background that I used. And then I used some of the new papaya and white ribbon. And the pale papaya, which to me goes really well with the paper. It's one of the colors that is used in that. And I did that little swishy thing with the ribbon. The colors of ink that I used are Calypso Coral to match the cardstock, and Pear Pizzazz, which is one of the greens in here. And then I also did the same thing with the two stamps that I used in the middle. And I wanted to do a little different. I know it's very minor, but I put the green on the top and the Calypso Coral on the bottom on the front, and then the opposite on the inside. When I put the ribbon on here, I used the glue dots to get that sort of laid down. And then I put the dimensionals on the 1-inch strip, not on the back of the piece that I punched out. And this is the punch that I used. I put it on the 1-inch strip because I don't want those dimensionals to go beyond that 1-inch piece. Otherwise, things might start sticking together. And a trick that I used is I had another piece that I punched out, and I laid that down. And that way I could see how tall that sentiment is. So I knew where I should put those dimensionals. And I knew that way I wouldn't get them too high or too low. I would get them right where I needed them to be. So that was one of the cards that I did. And I thought, you know what? I've got my designer series paper out, so I'm going to keep on going. So I did this one, same sentiments. Everything is the same sentiment, same design. I just played around with the front and wanted to come up with some just slightly different things, nothing super fancy.
It's cute.
My Stitch So Sweetly dies, and I cut out some Calypso Coral to match the back, and then some of the new gold twine, and just wrap that around. And this was a little easier to adhere because on this one, I could just put some Tombow on that 1-inch strip, put my sentiment straight down on the top. It also is a little bit more in terms of substantial sentiment. And I have the same happy birthday on the inside. I will add some bling and some sequins and things like that, but I just wanted to get the basics done. Then I kept going, and I used some more of the Peach Designer Series paper. I got a little addicted to this. Love this one because there are all these colors that are in here. And
That's pretty.
I do a little play on the ribbon idea, but this time I used some of that gold twine. And then I also decided that I would mess around with the punch. So I punched my sentiment out, and then I did another piece with the Calypso Coral. Just cut that piece in half, put that behind, and spread it out a little bit. So I had a little bit of a border. And again, did the same sentiment on the inside. But I really liked that color combination. I thought that was kind of cool. And then there's a really, really pretty piece in the DSP that has this balmy blue. And blue and green, I'll be honest, usually blue and green to me is one of those things that I have to look at to say, do I like it or not? And I really like it on this one. I think the green and the blue goes together really well. This is old ribbon, I apologize, but it worked. So I brought that in. Use the same Stitch So Sweetly die. I ran that through an embossing folder and kind of tacked that all together. And then I did the same sentiment on the inside. So I had a lot of fun, and it was, you know, a pretty easy design to start with. And then a couple of different ways to pull this all together, but using the same basic design for these. So that's what I did. And I'm going to stop the recording at this point because we've gone through the clues, we've seen the card. I think you can see that this is something that is very, very versatile. You could use it for a lot of different things, and I hope you do. And I'm going to stop the recording so I can get back to the group and everyone can share what they have done. I hope you enjoy, and I hope you make a lot of these cards. They are very fun and very addictive.